A solitary boat glided gracefully across the vast expanse of the open sea, carrying a special group of hidden travelers. Among them was the lively witch Maggie, who soared joyfully through the sky after transforming into a nimble seagull. The ship's captain watched in absolute wonder, completely stunned by her innate ability to inherit the navigation skills of any bird she became. Beside him stood Sylvie, a charming witch with silky green hair, who quietly acknowledged how vital Maggie had been to their long journey. The captain laughed heartily, boasting that he could still tell Maggie apart from normal birds simply by the unique shape of her body. Sylvie raised an eyebrow, noting that she rarely focused on such superficial physical traits due to the direct nature of her magical vision. Noticing the visible exhaustion weighing on the hard-working crew, Sylvie politely requested that they rotate their shifts to rest. The captain was deeply amazed by her sharp attention to detail, realizing that absolutely nothing could escape her perceptive eyes. As the crew scurried off, Sylve's thoughts drifted back to her final secret conversation with Princess Tilly regarding their true mission. She had been explicitly ordered to uncover Prince Roland's true identity and work with the local witch union to expose any foul play. A heavy dread settled in her heart that the local union might refuse to cooperate, choosing instead to imprison them all to protect the prince. Looking around, she saw the other young witches completely unbothered, laughing and playing across the deck without a single care. The young Molly was exceptionally ecstatic, cheering loudly that they were finally nearing their long-awaited destination. In stark contrast, a tiny witch with twin ponytails looked completely green, utterly defeated by a solid week of constant seasickness. The captain offered a reassuring grin, promising her that the terrible sickness would vanish the very moment her feet touched solid ground. The powerful witch Ash stepped forward to comfort the child, explaining that Maggie had already sent word ahead to the town. The little girl looked up with wide eyes, asking if Ash and Molly would be staying with them in Bordertown permanently. Ash shook her head gently, clarifying that they had merely tagged along as escorts and must return to Princess Tilly immediately. She then lowered her voice to a harsh whisper, warning the young girls to stay as far away from Roland Wimbledon as humanly possible. The little witch blinked in confusion, asking why they should fear him if he was simply Princess Tilly's royal brother. Ash scoffed quietly, claiming that despite his royal blood, the prince was notorious for being an absolute creep around young women. While they were busy discussing the prince's poor reputation, Sylvie suddenly spotted a massive object rising rapidly into the sky. The entire crew stared upward in complete awe, wondering what kind of legendary giant bird could possibly possess such an immense size. Even the senior witches were left entirely speechless, admitting that they had never witnessed such an impossible anomaly in their entire lives. As the boat drew closer to the docks, Sylve's heart filled with warmth at the sight of a vibrant welcome banner fluttering proudly in the breeze. The bold message clearly stated that Bordertown welcomed everyone, leaving the previously anxious Sylvie completely devoid of words. When the ship finally docked alongside the stone pier, the gentle Wendy was already waiting to greet them with open arms. While Ash maintained her perfectly cool and composed demeanor, the young newcomers behind her still looked incredibly nervous. It was at that exact moment that the brilliant Anna arrived on the scene, drawing the immediate focus of everyone present. As Sylve's eyes locked onto Anna, she was stunned to see all the ambient magical energy in the area naturally gravitating toward her. The sheer intensity of the raw power radiating from Anna blew her mind, proving just how phenomenally powerful this girl truly was. While the older leaders exchanged formal pleasantries, the younger girls immediately crowded around the massive hot air balloon floating near the docks. Wendy took the opportunity to explain the mechanics of the hot air balloon, easing their curiosity with a gentle explanation. Wendy then turned to Ash, asking one final time if she would join them in town to meet the prince who was eager for her return. Ash simply laughed it off, joking that the prince wouldn't want someone around who intends to recruit his talented witches back to her own island. She confidently stated that she was leaving the younger girls in safe hands, fully trusting Wendy's kind nature to care for them. Without wasting another second, Lightning enthusiastically ushered all the new witches into the large passenger basket of the balloon. Before Sylvie could even process her lingering anxiety, Anna suddenly snapped her fingers with absolute precision. A brilliant burst of pure black fire erupted beneath the burner, instantly propelling the massive balloon straight up into the clear sky. Molly waved a final joyful goodbye from the shrinking ground below as the girls surged into the clouds toward their brand new life. Prince Roland watched from his high castle balcony as the hot air balloon safely drifted back toward the clearing. The successful flight test meant that air transportation was no longer just a distant dream for his territory. Turning away from the view, he walked back inside to review the newest blueprints on his massive wooden desk. The next phase of his grand plan required a complete transformation of the town's textile manufacturing capabilities. He summoned Soraya to the laboratory to test the resilience of her newly synthesized magical coatings. Soraya smiled confidently as she raised her hands, summoning a brilliant vortex of magical multicolored paint. She smoothly applied the glowing pigment directly onto a piece of roughly woven linen cloth. The treated fabric immediately hardened into an incredibly dense, water-resistant protective layer. Roland praised her exceptional progress and immediately ordered the mass production of these modern garments. Within days, a dedicated workshop was established where local tailors worked alongside the witches. The newly arrived adult witches gathered in the grand hall to receive their custom-tailored modern outfits. These new uniforms were specifically designed to allow complete freedom of movement during intense physical labor. Tears of joy filled the eyes of many witches who had never experienced such comfort and dignity before. With the clothing crisis resolved, Roland shifted his primary focus toward securing an absolute food supply. He walked out to the expansive northern farmlands accompanied by Leaf, the powerful nature witch. The upcoming winter threatened to devastate the region unless they achieved an unprecedented harvest yield. Leaf closed her eyes tightly, concentrating her magical energy into the dormant seeds buried deep beneath. Suddenly, thousands of vibrant green sprouts violently burst through the earth simultaneously. The crops grew at an impossible speed, thick stalks thickening and stretching toward the afternoon sun. Within mere hours, the entire northern valley turned into an ocean of shimmering golden wheat. Hundreds of eager townspeople rushed out with sickles and wooden baskets to begin the grand harvest. Heavy wooden wagons fully loaded with golden grain began lining up along the main roads. Roland calculated that this single massive yield would easily sustain the entire population for over 2 years. That evening, massive bonfires were lit across the town square to celebrate their newly found food security. The witches sat together at long tables, laughing freely without the constant fear of persecution. Roland watched the joyful festivities from his study window, knowing this peace was incredibly fragile. He knew his ambitious brother Timothy would soon realize the growing strength of Border Town. To protect this haven, he needed to accelerate his underground mining operations for raw iron ore. The next morning, a group of royal miners descended deep into the western mountain shafts. They utilized newly manufactured black powder charges to blast through the thickest rock veins. A massive explosion rocked the cavern, clearing away centuries of tightly packed earth. As the thick dust slowly settled, the chief miner noticed a strange, unnatural glow ahead. Instead of normal iron ore, the blast had uncovered a massive subterranean cavern of impossible proportions. Resting quietly in the exact center of the cavern was a monolithic structure of unknown origin. The air inside this deep chamber felt incredibly heavy, vibrating with an ancient, raw energy. Recognizing the immense danger, the chief miner immediately sent a runner back to the surface. Prince Roland received the urgent report while eating breakfast and instantly dropped his utensils. He gathered a small group of elite guards along with key witches to investigate this anomaly. They rapidly descended into the deep, dark mountain depths, leaving behind the warmth of the sun. As Roland finally stepped into the hidden cavern, the giant crystal structure suddenly flared with a menacing, blinding red light. The blinding crimson radiance completely filled the damp cavern, forcing Prince Roland to shield his eyes with a heavy leather sleeve. Beside him, Nightfall immediately stepped forward and raised her hands to summon protective wooden vines. The giant crystal structure vibrated violently, humming with an ancient, forgotten power that shook the very bedrock of Border Town. Roland took a tentative step backward, his boots splashing into the shallow puddles of water covering the uneven cave floor. Scroll approached the perimeter of the light, her eyes scanning the bizarre geometric patterns etched deep into the glowing mineral surface. The geometric lines pulsed in tandem with a low heartbeat sound that echoed throughout the subterranean chamber. Roland realized that this strange subterranean phenomenon did not align with any known natural mineral properties of this medieval world. Anna flew into the cavern via Wendy's wind current, her green flames flickering unsteadily due to the overwhelming ambient magic. Lightning clung tightly to Soraya's shoulder, shivering as the oppressive weight of the crimson aura pressed against their skin. Scroll reached out her hand, intending to test if her magical archive could recognize these foreign symbols. Roland grabbed Scroll's wrist firmly, stopping her before her fingers could make direct contact with the volatile structure. He warned the gathered witches that tampering with unknown high-energy anomalies without proper safety protocols was strictly forbidden. As if responding to Roland's voice, the giant crystal suddenly dimmed, returning the cavern to a cold, pitch-black silence. Anna quickly ignited a bright sphere of emerald fire, casting a steady illumination over the damp stonework once more. Roland ordered a specialized team of miners to construct heavy wooden barricades around the excavation site immediately. He knew that this discovery introduced a dangerous wildcard into his calculated industrialization plans for Border Town. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in the royal capital, King Timothy sat upon his throne, glaring at a map of the western region. The Mad King slammed his fist onto the ornate table, furious over reports of Roland's growing economic independence. A cloaked high priest stepped out from the shadows, whispering malicious counsel about utilizing the church's forbidden pills. Timothy smiled maliciously, visualizing the utter destruction of his brother's makeshift border settlements. He signed a royal decree ordering the immediate mobilization of the elite Royal Navy, alongside conscripted mercenary armies. Hundreds of armored soldiers began marching toward the docks of the Redwater River, their metal armor clanking in unison. Massive wooden warships were loaded with heavy ballistas, supplies, and iron crates marked with the royal crest. Back in Border Town, the eagle-eyed witch Honey noticed unusual pigeon traffic flying across the eastern borders. She immediately flew back to the castle to report the suspicious military movements to Prince Roland. Roland listened intently to the report, his fingers tracing the course of the Redwater River on his tactical sandbox map. He realized that a conventional defense would fail against the massive numbers Timothy was deploying. To secure victory, he would have to combine modern chemistry with the unique magical properties of his loyal witches. Roland summoned the chemical manufacturing team to accelerate the production of high-grade gunpowder. Anna used her refined black flames to precisely weld the heavy steel barrels of newly designed artillery cannons. Chief Knight Carter marveled at the terrifying engineering marvels being constructed inside the backyard courtyard. Roland explained the basic concepts of artillery trajectory and line-of-sight warfare to his confused military officers. He selected a narrow, steep bend along the Redwater River as the absolute perfect location for a devastating ambush. Under the cover of night, Nightfall used her magic to rapidly grow massive trees to camouflage the artillery positions. The soldiers worked silently, hauling heavy iron cannonballs up the muddy slopes using thick hemp ropes. Within days, a completely hidden line of defense stood ready to rain fire upon any invading armada. Yet Roland still felt a lingering unease regarding the dormant red crystal structure beneath his feet. Far underground, deep within the sealed barricades, a tiny hair-thin fracture suddenly split across the crystal's smooth surface. Out of the fissure, a thin, mist-like wisp of crimson smoke began to leak into the silent cavern air. Simultaneously, on the horizon of the Redwater River, the massive sails of King Timothy's vanguard fleet finally came into view. Prince Roland stood atop the fortified embankment and watched the enemy sails flutter against the gray sky. Next to him, the witch lightning floated a few feet above the muddy ground to maintain a clear line of sight. The massive wooden war vessels of King Timothy's vanguard fleet sliced aggressively through the churning waters. Hidden beneath thick layers of camouflage netting and freshly cut branches, the newly forged artillery pieces sat in absolute silence. Iron Axe raised his calloused hand, signaling the First Army soldiers to hold their positions until the precise moment. The young gunners gripped their ignition cords tightly, their knuckles turning white under the immense pressure. Roland checked his mechanical pocket watch, calculating the exact speed of the approaching enemy armada. The lead flagship of the invading royal forces proudly displayed the Golden Lion banner on its primary mast. Anna stood quietly in the shadows of the command bunker, her green magical flames ready to assist if a weapon malfunctioned. Timothy's commander stood on the ship's deck, entirely unaware that hundreds of gun barrels were trained directly on his hull. When the Vanguard fleet crossed the marker stone on the riverbank, Roland dropped his hand and gave the final order. A deafening roar shattered the silence of the valley as the hidden battery of 12-pounder cannons fired simultaneously. Iron cannonballs tore through the damp air, screaming toward the tightly packed formation of wooden ships. The lead warship exploded into a cloud of deadly splinters as 3 consecutive projectiles smashed through its main hull. Enemy soldiers were thrown violently into the freezing water as the decks tilted sharply under the brutal impact. Iron Axe quickly bellowed the order to reload, and the well-trained crews moved with mechanical efficiency. Swabs were shoved down the hot iron barrels, extinguishing any remaining embers before the next powder charge went in. On board the remaining vessels, commanders screamed contradictory orders as they tried to locate the source of the attack. From her aerial vantage point, Lightning radioed back real-time targeting corrections to Roland's command center. Roland nodded as he received the adjustments, passing the new coordinates to the heavy mortar crews positioned further back. The second volley commenced, throwing up massive pillars of white water that rocked the surviving enemy vessels violently. A direct hit shattered the mainmast of the enemy's secondary flagship, sending the heavy rigging crashing down onto the crew. Realizing they could not fight an invisible enemy, the remaining captains attempted to turn their heavy ships around in the narrow channel. Roland had anticipated this maneuver and ordered the grape-shot ammunition to be loaded for the final sweep. The resulting blast swept across the open decks like a devastating iron hail, completely neutralizing the invading infantry. The proud emblem of King Timothy's royal guard sank slowly beneath the crimson-tinted ripples of the Redwater River. As the echoes of the last cannon shot faded, a profound silence settled over the entire valley. The soldiers of the First Army broke out into cheers, raising their modern firearms high into the smoke-filled air. Roland stepped out of the command tent, feeling the cool evening breeze wash over his face. Anna walked up to his side, her hand gently resting on the cold stone wall as she looked at him with admiration. The threat of Timothy's immediate invasion had been completely crushed, leaving border towns safer than it had ever been before. In the town square, the citizens and newly arrived witches celebrated together, sharing a massive feast funded by the record harvest. Princess Tilly's witches realized they had finally found a true sanctuary where their powers were celebrated instead of feared. The successful integration of magic and industrial engineering had proven to be an unstoppable combination for the future. Roland returned to his castle office, immediately spreading a massive blueprints map across his broad wooden desk. He began sketching out plans for the grand expansion of the kingdom, visualizing a land defined by progress and equality. Outside his window, a massive hot air balloon floated majestically under the starry night sky, symbolizing their limitless potential. The old world of superstition and tyranny was crumbling, replaced by an era of reason, industry, and unity. Prince Roland knew that many challenges lay ahead on the path to unifying the entire continent, but he was completely prepared. With a loyal army and the unstoppable force of technology on his side, the dawn of a glorious new empire had finally arrived.